All right, folks, let us discuss what is the good life. So we're going to start with an introduction. Then we're going to define some crucial terms like the good, happiness, and virtue. We will review some major questions, and then we'll do an overview of our major philosophical positions that we will be studying in the next 2 weeks. 3 weeks, actually. 3 weeks. So in this unit, we will be discussing the following problem in moral philosophy. What is the good life? Now, in a moment, a formal philosophical definition of good life will be revealed. But before we take a closer look, let me ask you a question. When you hear the term good life, what does this mean to you? So when you reflect upon the term good life, what are some images that come to you? That is, what does a good life literally look like to you? So for example, are these people living a good life? They're wearing fine jewelry, eating hors d'oeuvres, drinking champagne, staying on a yacht. Is this what a good life looks like? How about her? This bodybuilder who's obviously worked very hard to get this kind of physique. Is she living a good life? And what about this gentleman? Wearing a suit and tie, well manicured hands, arm on a leather chair in a nice office, nice watch, obviously well educated, professional. Is he living a good life? And what about this gentleman? A wandering invalid, homeless. Is he living a good life? And lastly, what about you? If you think about your life as it is now and what you value, are you living a good life? So, just some things for us to consider, as we approach the material in this unit. And now that we've given some thought to that, let's define some of the major terms that we'll be using in this unit. So let's first start with the term the good. So in terms of defining the good life, the term good refers to something's ability to fulfill a purpose or function, and therefore it is considered of some kind of value. So for example, what is a good watch? Well, we first would have to reflect on what the function of a watch is. And the function of a watch is to tell time efficiently. So this Rolex watch, we could say, is a very good watch because it efficiently tells time because of its design and reliability. And the same logic is used when we think about what a good friend is. So we would first have to reflect upon the purpose or function of a friend. And if you say that a friend is someone who is always there for you, gives you support, then if someone does that for you, then they have fulfilled their function and therefore can be considered a good friend. So when something is good, it means that it's able to fulfill some kind of a function and therefore has some value to it. So a good life refers to an existence which is dedicated to fulfilling a purpose or function. And therefore a good person is someone who is able to fulfill his or her function as a human being. But what is the function of a human being? Well, this is something that our commentators are going to disagree on. Now, it is not uncommon that a good life is considered synonymous with happiness, and happiness refers to experiencing feelings of joy or pleasure. But once again, there is an issue that crops up. Does a good life equal happiness? That is, are these two terms synonymous with one another? Well, some philosophers say yes. They believe that when you pursue a good life, you will experience happiness, and therefore they equal one another. However, other philosophers consider the pursuit of the good and the pursuit of happiness to be opposites. So there is a 20th century Jewish philosopher by the name of Emmanuel Levinas who argues this position. He says, the happier you are, is an indication that you are not living a good life, that you are not doing your moral duty toward other people. So actually, the more miserable you are, the closer you are to living a good life. Now, in the ancient Greek unit, we talked about this term virtue, or arete in Greek, in ancient Greek, which is roughly translated as excellence. So virtue is excellence, and virtuous refers to an individual who is able to fulfill his or her purpose or function in a superior way. So when someone is virtuous, they are living the good life, but they are doing it just that much better than other people. So here are some major questions for us to consider in this unit. What is the human purpose or function? How do we discover it? And then once we discover it, how do we fulfill that function? 2, will living a good life ultimately result in happiness? Because as we know, there is some division among philosophers on this question. And what is virtue or excellence? And who or what determines who is superior and who is not? Now, in this unit, we are going to be discussing 5 major commentators, the philosopher Aristotle and St. Augustine. We'll talk about 2 schools of thought, the hedonists and the Stoics. We'll also get a little bit of commentary from a school of thought called the Cynics. And then we're also going to talk about the perspective of the 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go over a general overview of what they believe the human purpose or function is, just to give us a preview of things to come. Now, the first commentator that we're going to study in this class is the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. Now, what is the human purpose or function according to Aristotle? To adhere to the universal purpose ordered by nature. So for Aristotle, he believes that there is a universal standard or a universal function that all human beings have to adhere to live a good life. And more specifically, what is that function? To live a healthy, well-rounded existence. And this is something that nature has bestowed upon humanity, kind of like an inherent purpose given to human beings. Now, St. Augustine agrees with Aristotle. There does exist a universal human purpose, but instead of being ordered by nature, it is ordered by God. And what is this purpose? To establish a relationship with God. Now, what about the hedonists? According to the hedonists, what is the human purpose or function? Again, agreeing with Aristotle, to adhere to the universal purpose ordered by nature. And what is that purpose? To pursue pleasure and to avoid pain. And so we're going to talk about the 2 major hedonists, Aristippus and Epicurus. Now the Stoics, as you can see, are surrounded by 2 asterisks because they're kind of like outliers. For them, the human purpose or function is to accept that our fate is beyond our control, and that means to acquire courage and to minimize attachment to the world. And we're going to take a look at some of the writings of Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Diogenes the Cynic, who is considered to be kind of like a forerunner to the school of Stoicism. And lastly, Friedrich Nietzsche is another kind of one of our outliers. He's going to argue that there's no such thing as a universal human purpose, but rather there only exists individual functions. So for him, you just have to adhere to your own self-created purpose and become an individual. And for him, this self-created purpose is to fully express individual talents and to exploit the environment. Now, this chart is not designed to be comprehensive. It is a chart. It is just kind of a visual aid to help us in our study. So just kind of like keep this chart in mind as we are kind of continuing along through our study, and then these positions will become clear as we continue along. All right, so just a little timeline for you. So we are going to be talking about ancient commentators, commentators from classical antiquity, and the modern period. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to start with Aristotle, who's highlighted right there. And then we'll move on to our Stoics, Cynics, and Hedonists. Then we'll talk about the position of St. Augustine and Nietzsche, and we're going to kind of juxtapose them to one another. So with this in mind, let us move on to our first commentator, the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle.